Sure.
Taking.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's Wednesday, January 18th, and
You can take it.
we're gonna start the morning by talking in regards to the right to farm bill. And last year, the bill was in the House passed it over, but it ended up in judiciary and kind of got stuck there. And so we're back at trying to update that law. And we have with us our staff person, Michael O'Grady. Bill Rowell is with us, farmer from Highgate, also folks from the Department Agency of Education. And I think I've worked off and on this fall with Bill and Amanda to try to get some language that the committee might be able to use to update the present right to farm law. I don't know, we'll run around the room and introduce ourselves, and then we'll get our guests to introduce themselves and we'll get started.
Brian Collmore, the senator from Rutland County.
Irene Renner, Chittenden North, which includes Fairfax and Franklin County.
Brian Campion, Bennington County.
Rich Westman, Memorial County.
And I'm Bobby Starr from Orleans County. So, Laura, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Good morning. Laura DePietra, the Director of Water Quality at the Agency of Agriculture.
Good morning, Steve Collier from the Agency of Agriculture.
Michael O'Grady, Legislative Council.
Emma Schuldeis with William Schuldeis and Associates.
I'm Tucker Purchase from Fairmont Farm here in East Montpelier.
And we have Linda Lehman, who's our various able assistant. And I don't know, Michael, did you want to give us a little overview of when this all started and the last time it had been updated and something like that?
Sure. I mean, the right to farm law was first enacted, I believe, in 2000, no, actually 1985, around 1981. It was amended the last time that I know of in 2003, 2004. And that was in response in part to an Iowa Supreme Court case that had ruled that a similar law in Iowa affected a taking of neighboring property. Consequently, the General Assembly had revised its law to address that and also to address a case, the Tricketts versus Ox case, in which a court had found that a change in practice at I believe they were an apple farm, constituted a nuisance, and so that the law was amended to address that as well. And it hasn't changed since then. What has happened is that there was a case last year in which a Superior Court judge determined that farming practices at a dairy farm in Addison constituted both a trespass and a nuisance, and the court held that the farm did not qualify for the right to farm because they could not show that they were in conformity with law, and that she also determined, the court determined that there had been significant changes. And then she had some, what is referred to as dicta, in which she said even if they had qualified, that the plaintiffs would have been able to overcome the presumption that it was not a nuisance because there was a noxious interference. Their use and enjoyment, significant and noxious interference with their use and enjoyment of the neighboring property.
Well, so anyways, we're trying to update our right to farm bill. And we have Bill Well with us to lead off the testimony this morning, who's spent quite a lot of time working with some other farms, as well as professor from Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, I believe it is.
Penn State University
Penn State or
And-
Penn State.
and the University of Arkansas.
Okay. So you want to lead off, Bill, with where you folks are, and we'll go from there.
Well, I guess I'd start by Bill Rowell, for the record, dairy farmer from Franklin County. We milk 900 cows 3 times a day. And you'll notice that Vermont is under 600 dairy farms at this point, 572, I think it is. So a nuisance suit knocks more farms out of the picture. It discourages the next generation from wanting to have anything to do with farms when anybody can come along and throw a stone at you. So this is quite important. How important is it? This country produced, year ending 22, produced just shy of 227 billion pounds of milk. 18% of that milk was exported in the form of milk equivalent products like cheese, powder, and that sort of thing, for a total value of $9.5 billion. That's 3.5% of the gross domestic product for this country. And that's across this country, over 3 million jobs. So I know the farm numbers are down, but agriculture really produces. And we're not just feeding this country, but we're feeding other countries as well. So to have some simple tool that would protect the farmer seems to me like it's a must. If we're interested in growing our own food in this country, if we're interested in having farms left in New England, Vermont produces 2/3 of the milk produced in New England. So now is the time. I mean, we're getting close to where the time's going to be behind us if we don't pay attention. So this is really quite important. The guy that we were talking with on the Zoom conference from Pennsylvania State University is an attorney. His name is Brooke Duer, D-U-E-R. He teaches law. He was a staff counsel for Penn State University for 6 years. He's very familiar with right to farm law because Penn State University has a National Agriculture Law Center, which works in conjunction with the National Agriculture Law Center at the University of Arkansas. So rather than reinvent the wheel, I thought it'd be kind of handy if we could pick his brain. And he has some good ideas. The one thing that he said, and I think Michael Grady agrees with this, that he said short and simple is easier to get past than something that's voluminous. So Michael has something that fits that bill, so to speak. The thing that I was interested in was seeing that the right to farm law gets tied, the short and simple version, gets tied to the required agricultural practices. For this reason. For one, if it's tied to the RAPs, then the farm is following the RAPs and is in compliance. You can't go to the farm and say, we want to take you to court because of this or that or the other. If you're in compliance, they now need to go to the Agency of Agriculture or the Agency of Natural Resources, whichever the matter applies to, and have that discussion there before they come to the farm. The other thing that it does, in my opinion, I'm not an attorney, so my understanding is if it's tied to the RAPs, the farm is in compliance. The agencies, not saying anyone in particular, but I've noticed over the years that agencies tend to want to, at times, exceed their authority granted by the legislature. So if everything is going according to the way it's written, they can't exceed their authority. They only have that granted to them by the legislative body. And I think that's where we want to keep it, so we don't have a rogue secretary, so to speak, deciding they're going to do such and such. Now what do? You have no control over it. You're upside down. So my opinion, for what it's worth, short and simple, tie it to the RAPs and have it granted by the legislative body.
And one issue that I think he raised, and you talked to it a little bit earlier today, was the trespass issue.
Yeah.
And I think it was his intentions, you should stay away from that particular issue if you can.
Should I read this?
Yeah, I mean.
Okay. So the attorney Duar, I've been after him in back and forth for the last 3 weeks, and I said, look, we're going to end up in front of Senate Ag, and there's going to be a discussion, and I want to, doesn't have to be exhaustive, but I'd like your opinion on the revised bill. And so finally I got it last night. And here's what he said. He said, as I have said previously, if this bill were to pass as is, it would certainly be better for farmers than current Vermont law. And here's some notes under 5751. It only refers to providing protection from nuisance suits, but the text of the bill also provides protections from trespass throughout. He said, I use parentheses here because the term trespass is really a generic word. It could be interpreted by a court in the future as including many and various different legal causes of action, lawsuits. Those causes of action potentially included for protection could include a multitude of types of claims for money damages and other legal remedies. On the other hand, nuisance is a very specific legal term that includes only one legal cause of action, which can be characterized as either a private nuisance or a public nuisance, and the precise meaning of that term is not ambiguous. Then 5752, he says no comments, looks fine, serves the purpose intended. 5753, he had 3 different bullet points. He said this provides protection from both nuisance and trespass suits, and the flaws with that are addressed above, including trespass. Generically would presumably draw immediate attention and the objection from the plaintiff's bar. The entire bill should be amended to say nuisance and trespass to property. Anything beyond nuisance is included within the protection granted. Next is page 5, line 1 to 2. For maximum protection of farmers, the text and the activity was not a nuisance or trespass at the time the activity was initiated is not desirable. Including this text simply invites the plaintiff in a case to simply allege when it started it wasn't a problem, but things have now gotten worse. He said that's all a plaintiff would have to do to defeat any motion to dismiss a case. The credibility of the plaintiff's testimony about whether things have gotten worse will always be made a question of fact for only a jury to decide. So by including this text, every case could easily be made to require a jury trial and the accompanying expense. Next and last is page 5, line 8 through 9. For maximum protection of farmers, the text which excludes from protection a claim which results from the negligent operation of an agricultural activity. That just invites the plaintiff in the case to simply allege that the actions upon which the case is based were done negligently. That is all a plaintiff would have to do to defeat any motion to dismiss the case at any time. Perhaps ironically, alleging that the claim is based upon negligent acts may be helpful in invoking insurance coverage on any policy of liability insurance held by the farmer sued.
Yeah.
And Senator Starr has a copy of that, so he could distribute copies to your committee.
Yes, they all have a copy of
Okay, good.
the letter. I don't, did you have other witnesses that wanted to chime in at this point, Bill, or?
Well, is Amanda joining us?
Yes, there's Amanda. Good morning, Amanda.
Good morning, everyone.
Bob, a quick,
Just a second, Amanda.
Mr. Oak, do you know how many lawsuits, how many farms have been sued in the past decade?
Yeah.
Roughly,
Very few.
100, 10?
No, it's a small number, I believe.
Michael,
It's hard to say. Over the last decade, I would say probably under 15.
In the past year?
Past year, I only know one.
But see, when you say farms, you're not talking just dairy. You're talking everything,
Right.
vegetables, sheep, pork, goats.
So you're saying dairy farms could be the number? Thank you.
any other questions?
I wonder if we can get a copy of the right to farm statute. If
Yeah,
that's-
Linda's getting.
You're on it, okay. 'cause
Yeah, that'd be
That would
great.
be really helpful to have that side by side as we're talking. Thank you.
I think Mr. O'Grady is doing a side-by-side also for us on the before and after, sort of what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, ready to go to Amanda?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Amanda St. Pierre. Welcome, new Senate Ag members. And I currently am the Executive Director of Vermont Dairy Producer Alliance, which formed about 7 years ago now. I think we might be losing my voice, so pardon if I keep doing that. About 7 years ago, and we are made up of dairy farms in all the counties, and certainly our businesses affect every county economically. We formed to represent dairies at a time when we just didn't think that we had a presence in the State House, and we wanted to educate folks about what we were doing and the changes we were making, and the unique things that we bring to the table that other industries may not do. So we are excited to be here today, and we're excited to work with your committee on all things related to dairy and ag. And certainly the right to farm is an important issue to us. I'll tell you a little bit about myself prior to getting into my testimony on this bill. I currently farm with my husband, and as January 1st came around, we were excited to have our 2 sons join in the farm. So we're transitioning to the next generation. This has been a couple of years in the making. I have a son who is going to be 28 in May, Jamie, and he's married to his wife, Ellie, and they are actively both on the farm today. She does run on the side. Her little side gig is running. But currently she is working on the farm as she awaits her first child. And then my son Bradley is also married, and he has 2 children with 1 on the way. And he is 26, and they both came back from college and joined our dairy operation. I say this because it is a matter of pride for us. So I'm using that a little bit, but there are a lot of dairies in the state that are looking to transition to the next generation. And some of what we're talking about in the Right to Farm offers some security to doing that. Our farm is located in Berkshire. We have around 100 employees, and we are considered a large farm under the state permit. We're currently diversifying into taking our methane digester, and instead of making electricity, we're looking to make renewable natural gas. And I'm saying that again because I think the Right to Farm is another key component of farms diversifying into that field. So at this point, the testimony on this bill is we have been looking at this for several years and researching and looking at other states and talking to other farmers and other dairy associations and just trying to see what would make sense to really update a Right to Farm bill that we already have. And that's kind of how the conversation began. We're not looking for the Cadillac. We're not looking for the strongest language like Oregon. You know, really the ask is simple. We would like it updated. We are required in the state to follow certain guidelines, and we do not feel at this point that even by implementing those guidelines and following state statute, that we are offered the protections that we need. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about, as our industry, and I just looked it up, in 2020, Vermont generated $0.7 billion in ag cash receipts, and the highest value commodity of that was dairy. And again, this was back in 2020. So, you know, 2020 was a time of great change with COVID. I bring that to the forefront because dairy continues and has been a player in our state economically. We're a driver. And we bring in money that comes from outside the state, invest it in state businesses. And to do that and not get minimal protection under the law is concerning. We're investing every day. We've been investing every day since my husband and I began farming in 1986. And we have practices that we have to invest in. And I did hear Michael O'Grady when he spoke last about the investment into manure storage, ponds basically, and into stormwater ponds, into silage leachate ponds, and into digesters. Franklin County has the highest number of digesters in the state, in the county. And all of these things took great investment. And it could be, someone could say, the smell from there is noxious. They'd have to prove that in the court. But it would just be good to have something that could say that they did this in accordance with the law. And that's really what we're asking. And I think a lot of, one reason you don't see a lot of lawsuits up to this point is because we try to work with our neighbors. We work really hard with our neighbors. We communicate with them. We're sending out newsletters to them, keeping them updated on what we're doing. We have, if they have a complaint, we try to address it. You know, there's a lot of work done to avoid these types of things. But in the case where you just can't resolve it, it would serve us to have this Right to Farm bill updated. And we talk about diversity, and I want to bring up this gas project because I think you're going to see more farms coming in that have digesters. one of the benefits to having a digester is that it created an economic revenue. It was using something our cows do every day, which is produce manure. And it captures the methane and stops it from going up into the ozone, and then it creates electricity, which we were able to sell. Markets have developed in the last 20 years, 10 years, 5 years aggressively to offer our dairy farms an interesting place to be, because a lot of us have digesters currently, and those that don't could maybe join together and build a digester, but it gives us another market that we can kind of meet our goals on the carbon side, but still get an economic revenue. So it involves infrastructure, right? We have to build, we have to do different things, and it would be nice to be covered under the law. If someone didn't particularly like, the way the silo, the digester looked, or anything to that effect, or again, manure has a smell. The digester kills a lot of the pathogens that cause the smell. But when you land apply and you're manure injecting, you could smell it still. And so those are all concerns, right? They're all concerned that somebody isn't going to understand what we're doing and take it past the point of compromise or discussion. So as we get more involved in diversifying our dairies, and I say dairies because I'm a dairy farmer, but again, this right to farm covers, and last year we heard testimony from Christmas tree farmers who they have a very short window selling their Christmas trees, and the parking has become, people who moved in don't like the cars parked there when they're going to get Christmas trees. And we heard berry farmers, we've heard from sheep farmers, and this affects really all of us, this right to farm coverage. So we are here today to just offer information of the types of practices that we currently do, that we're looking to do in the future, in hopes that you can ask questions and get to better understand the direction we're taking this, but also why a protection like this could be helpful to be updated. And again, we're following state statute. We're not asking for protection if we're not under the required ag practices, or we're doing something that's not, not under the regulations. We're asking for protection from doing things that we're regulated to do. And I'll open it up to any questions that you guys may have.
Yeah. Have you folks, because you have several farms, right? And have you ever been bothered with any of these nuisance suits, Amanda, or where you felt that, or have you not been bothered? Because Franklin County is a big agricultural county, so maybe it's not, you folks aren't bothered as much, or?
Well, so interesting. Yes, we have farms kind of scattered throughout the county, different land bases, if you will. And I think, Franklin County, and I don't have the right statistics, a lot of the land we farm has been land trusted. So it is required to be used for ag purposes. So, there's manure being spread on the fields. We're cultivating, we're growing corn, we're doing that kind of thing. In the last 2 years, the demographics and the people who have moved into the area is a very different mix of people. Welcome everybody. But I'm not sure that they're used to dairy farming or farming activities on land that the state has invested to keep open. So this is the concern, Senator, is that as we're using this designated land for the purpose it's designated for, is there going to be an issue? Are we protected? Currently, no, we have been able to work with neighbors who have had concerns. We have been able to work with agencies if a neighbor has had a concern and the agency has come out, the agencies have try to work with that neighbor and explain they have a buffer, they're applying it correctly. But there's always the chance that someone has deep pockets and is willing to pursue this. And it would be just a source of, just a source of comfort for my two sons and their wives who will be taking over this dairy business, that they'll be able to farm within the law.
Yeah, we're certainly getting a lot of folks are moving north to our state, and they certainly are coming from a lot of different places and different backgrounds, and not accustomed to our local people and the way they react to their neighbors and things. So I certainly get your point. There are other questions, Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Amanda, thanks for coming this morning. It's good to see you again. And I'm sympathetic with your view about the digester. How much is a digester?
Well, back when we put it in, it was in 2006, and it was around 2.1 total investment into the digester. Now that was 2006.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're expensive. It's not cheap, and it's not cheap to run. It's not cheap to maintain. And a lot of our digesters were put in around the same time. So we're looking at some huge investments to upgrade. And so I really feel farms are probably going to look to the same route we're looking to, because it helps flow those upgrades, and there's opportunity there. So yeah, they're very expensive. I think the one that they're putting in this time is going to be over $10 million.
Yeah. So as I say, if I were a farmer before I could make that investment, I would feel much better knowing that there was some legal protection behind it. So I get what you're saying for sure.
Yes.
Are there any, Brian?
Thanks. This is really helpful testimony, and it's good to see you. So this might be something that we'll get from Ledge Council when we get to side by side, but do you have a sense of what will be protected under the new law that wouldn't be protected right now in terms of actions and activities on a farm?
So I think my interpretation, and I'm not an attorney, but my hope is that we're going to be protected for the practices that we're required to do currently under state statute. I mean, that is a hope for me. It's very concerning. And keep in mind, we started work on this before the Volsterfeld trial even happened. And last year, as we were talking about this, it really had no involvement in what was going on with their farm. But since then, the ruling has come out, and it really shows holes in our current right to farm, where we can't be offered protection for what we're being asked to do and what we're being asked to spend considerable amount of money for. I think there's a misconception that our practices are financed by the Agency of Ag or NRCS or FSA. There is money available, but most of the time it pays maybe 20%, 10% of what they're asking us to do. Never has it paid 100% of the investment that we're asked to do. And sometimes, to be quite frank, in order to get that practice implemented quickly, the farmer has to pay for it directly, because there could be a 3 to 5 year wait to get this practice in place.
Thank you.
Well, and just for the committee's knowledge, we did a little cost analysis this summer, the task force on what it costs a Vermont farm to operate compared to our neighbors, New Hampshire, Mass, New York, Maine was another one. But it costs our farmers, what's projected and estimated to be $1.70 cents, I think it is, a hundredweight.
Yeah.
More to produce milk in Vermont than it does, say, in New York or Mass or New Hampshire to meet these like RAPs and all the different regulations, which Amanda just alluded to. They get some help toward meeting the different regs, but the bulk of it's borne by, the farmer. And so, there are some facts to back up, these things, so.
And are you saying, Senator, it's more expensive because we have more regulation in the other states? Or
Well, a
possibly
lot
because
of it
that's
was
what's
due
jacking
to
up.
the lawsuit that was brought against the state for water pollution but
Okay.
nobody, I don't think they've ever done a real cost analysis of what it does cost to meet those requirements. And not saying that those are bad, but it's a rule and the law that we follow the RAPs. And the RAPs, when we put this together many years ago, weren't really in place, I don't believe. So things have happened to try to make our farms more sustainable and for the long haul. That's caused some of this in some people to want to revise their right to farm. So, yes,
Thank you, Senator. Just for the record, Caroline Gordon with Rule Vermont. Also very sympathetic to all the issues raised this morning. And hearing from Amanda, definitely support that amending right to farm to cover also farm diversification, succession planning. But I also want to underscore currently no beginning farmer, no new farmer moving to Vermont, putting up shop on good agricultural soils next to a neighbor that has been there before is protected from nuisance lawsuits currently.
Yeah.
So the amendment, I'm looking forward to studying more, but if we can change it all together so that any type of farming that is regulated under the REPs and that is covered with the new amended practices that are now protected, no matter when they start a business, that's I think one step towards incentivizing farming in the state, even though it doesn't solve any of the underlying related issues like affordability of farmland or so on and so forth.
Other questions for Bill or Amanda at this point?
Well, that was the premise of the whole thing, was to be all inclusive as far as farms. Doesn't matter if you're growing, doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're a farmer, you're a farmer. You're included.
Very good.
I would say the Act 248 permit process that we had to go through for the digester, that's a fairly exhaustive process, and it's a worthwhile thing to do. We had to do it twice because we started with one big engine and then we put in a second one, so we had to go through the process again, which seemed foolish, but we went through it twice. But if you do that, it indemnifies you to some extent because you've already passed the test, so to speak. And our digester cost us $2.75 million. But the reason that had something to do with it was we had to build 3.2 miles of three-phase infrastructure.
Yeah.
That was $256,000 out of our pocket for something we never owned.
Yeah.
But the idea of working with people that don't understand what your practice is, I'll speak to that for just a second. Over the past, we'll call it 12 years, about 13 years, we've hosted tours for over 33,000 people from 48 countries, if you include the US. 48 countries. And the most common thing that you hear as you go through and show people this, the animals, their housing, their feed, how they're handled, try to do it all in an open, transparent manner. And when you show them something, the most common thing is they say, well, I didn't realize it worked that way. No, but you had an opinion anyway. See, that's the problem. And the opinion has to have a factual base if it's going to be legitimate. So the idea was, my brother would say, why are we doing this again? Because we had a lot of people coming at us, but I think it makes a difference. I think it was worthwhile. People want to know. They want to know. So if you've got something like that, share it with them. Give them an idea. So,
Were a lot of these people neighbors and people are from all over the world, like you said? It's incredible.
I mean, I'm my picture is on the Ag Hall of Fame wall.
Oh, really?
And my picture includes 4 guys from Turkmenistan.
Wow. Wow.
They came to this country because they were trying to understand modern agricultural practices, and with the idea that they need to better feed their people, more reliably feed their people. So when you're working with that audience, it's a different conversation. People that are challenged for food, or the system's fragile, they're more respectful of it. They don't have the attitude that we have in this country. You know, oh, well, I don't want it in that size packaging. I want something else, and it's too expensive. Those folks appreciate nutrition, and it's quite the different conversation. But anyway, I guess that's all I have to say.
Any other questions for Amanda
No,
right now? Joe, are you with us, Joe? Joe's president of Farm Bureau.
Oh.
I am.
Yeah, good morning, Joe.
Good morning.
You've been away.
Yes, I just came back from the American Farm Bureau annual convention in San Juan, Puerto So but my car broke down, so I'm having trouble getting back to Vermont, but hopefully by Monday we'll be back and I'll be in to see you guys. So Senator Starr, thank you very much for having me on. So Joe Tisbert from Valley Dream Farm, an organic produce farm in Cambridge, Vermont. We are a small farm. We are also working on a transition plan for my daughter to take over the farm. She'd like it quicker than I would like it, but that's, she got a lot of energy and a lot of great ideas. So, speaking to the right to farm, not only is for dairy, and as a Farm Bureau president, we support all levels of farms. Where we want to support the largest dairy to the smallest vegetable farm or beef farm. We need this. We need an upgraded right to farm bill. Just a few years ago, a bull that got loose went to criminal court. We are, if you follow the state's future of agriculture and they want a lot of smaller farms and they want a lot of this, well, the smaller farms are not as efficient as the bigger farms. They may have a broken fence that they don't see right away, or they may not be able to cover something. And if an animal gets out, similar to that bull, and they get criminally processed, you just throw a knife into that hole, a bunch of people who would be farming at some level. So, this is really important across the board. A lot of the farms that we work with, need programs just like anybody else in order to survive. We also need to know that our backs are when we're following the right processes, the state should have our back. And right now, I don't believe it does so. If you look at the nuisance laws and you look at getting sued, criminally sued over a tragic accident. So from my point of view as a small farmer, we need as much protection as everybody else. I have people walking onto my farm all the time. My door is open. If you want to walk on my farm, I live in the most beautiful place in America. And if you want to walk on my farm, I allow that. But on the same token, I don't want you coming back at me and saying, well, I think you sprayed something over there, or you did some of this and you're organic and we get this all the time. So to strengthen this law would be good. So I spent I spent a lot of time talking with my brethren, my 50 other brethren or presidents of Vermont Farm Bureau. And I'm going to tell you that the right to farm laws are all over the place, and most states have a lot stronger right to farm than we do. And one of the things that came to me most was actually our neighbor in Massachusetts. And I said, how are you guys handling this? You have a lot more folks and a lot less farms. And they said, basically, if you're following the best farm practices, then you're covered. And we exhausted the RAPs, and a lot of us talked against it, and a lot of us talked for it. We came up with a good plan. And if you look at all the farms in the state, there's so many great climate practices being done on the farms. And if we eliminate that and we build more housing, what are we doing? But my point being is that if you're following the RAPs, if you're following the laws, then why should you be able to be harassed and farmed and prosecuted, or try to be prosecuted, taken to court, spending money? You shouldn't be able to do it. That's why you guys did a great job in setting up the RAPs and the best farm practices, and they're all listed across the state. We need to protect our farms, and we need to protect our industry, not only for that little farm, but for the bigger farms and the medium farms and all farms.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Brian?
Thanks, Joe. Good to see you. I'm just curious, in every profession, every business, sometimes there are bad actors. So I'm wondering, what kind of protection should an adjacent landowner actually have? You're not telling everyone you have no protections at all. So I'm just wondering what kinds of protections should be in place for adjacent landowners?
Well, from my point of view, if I'm following the practices, then I should be protected. These local landowners, I know from our point of view, we work with all our neighbors. I think most farms in the state work from all our neighbors. If you're not following the practices, then the neighbor should have the right. If you don't follow the practices that are in place, then there should be something that protects the neighbor. But I don't know a lot of farms that are not doing, I don't know any farms off the top of my head that are not following the RAPs, that are not doing the practices. Even if they're a small dairy herd or vegetable grower, there's still rules that you have to follow, and setbacks and all kinds of things that we need to protect our neighbors. So I think the first step is always to talk with your neighbor, and I think Amanda said that really well. And we do that all the time. We work with our neighbors all the time. Most farms have to. A lot of times our neighbors want us to help them out by maybe using a piece of their ground to make it worthwhile and working.
So Michael Grady, Ledge Council. So is that accurate that if a farm is not following then RAPs, the adjacent landowner does have the possibility then to sue under the new draft?
Under the new draft?
Yeah.
potentially.
but not definitely.
One thing you all have to remember is these cases are fact-based cases.
Yeah.
So to say that it's always going to be there or it's never going to be there, it's hard because it depends on the facts.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Joe.
I'd like to clarify that I have not seen the new adjusted rules from Brian, from Mr. Grady, and I'd love it if we could get a copy.
Yeah, we're gonna be holding, you know, at least a couple more hearings in regards to the draft. It's only a draft at this point, and so we've got, you know, we've got a place for it, you know, saved out, but this isn't something that, you know, I intend the committee to rush through. We, you know, because it'll be another 10 or 15 years probably before it gets changed again. And so we want to do it right, you know, as right as we can. So we're, you know, we're gonna spend some time putting the, you know, the new draft together.
The new draft is on the website.
Yeah, we just got it. Yeah.
And it's on
This is
the
what you just
website
print.
also.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Joe, you could go to our website and pick what we have in print up from our website.
Okay.
If that's of interest to you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
You know, we have to look at, you know, how are farms protecting themselves today? I mean, you know, not only financially, if you look at the water quality issue and the climate issue, the farms are so important to the solutions that, you know, the harder we make it for farmers to go forward, the less farmers we have. And I think we need to protect all farmers.
Yeah, no questions, no further questions for Joe.
Thank you.
So, welcome, and you're new to this,
I am very new to this.
Yeah.
If I just slide
Yeah.
right over here, no.
Yeah.
No, I'm fine. You good? I'm fine. So my name's Tucker Purchase. I operate Fairmont Farm here in East Montpelier. Thank you guys for the opportunity to come and introduce myself. So I farm with my aunt and uncle and my two cousins. So there's 5 of us that currently own the business. We milk 1,000 cows in East Montpelier, 450 cows in Craftsbury. We crop 3,800 acres and 13 cows. So we're very spread out. We've got a lot of things going on. So I've been involved. I'm not actually from a farm family. Started working at Fairmont when I was a young kid. Went on to New York to college. I graduated from Cornell. And then I was out in California for a little while. And at that time, there was 5 owners on the farm. 2 of the owners decided to leave. That gave me an opportunity to come back as a manager. And then in 2005, we bought out one of the senior partners. In 2007, we bought out 2 more senior partners. So just a short period of time there, in 5 years, there was a lot of evolution of ownership and movement. We also bought the farm in Craftsbury, and I lived up in Craftsbury for about 9 years. My wife is not from a farm at all. We actually went to high school together. She was living down in Washington, D.C., moved back to Craftsbury, and now I think she shares the same passion for agriculture and community as I do. So she worked at Hyde Park Elementary for quite a while when we lived there. Now she works at East Montpelier Elementary. She also helps run our market that we just started and run our summer camps. So we do a lot of different things there on the farm. I've got 2 girls, 9 and 6, that we actually live at the old Lylehaven farm. Great opportunity. Some of the opportunities on these larger dairies aren't great for kids just because we got so much going on. This farm gives us the opportunity. We have sheep, we have pig, we have calves, and those kids I work 12 days and take 2 days off. So if you ask my kids on the weekend what they want to do, they're probably going to say make cinnamon rolls first. But the second, they're going to say they want to work with dad, you know, and they want to go to the calf barn. They want to calve out cows and name calves and ride in the mower. So anyway, that's a brief history of me and what I'm all about. I think in my 20 years here on the farm, we've seen enormous change on the farm. And I think that's important because I think, you know, dairy's always evolving. And I think even going ahead, it's going to evolve differently. From 2005 till now, I think we added on to the barns or built barns 10 different times. We built 4 manure pits. You know, our equipment changed, our crops changed, our, you know, equipment, I used to use a 3,500 gallon spreader. Now I got 72s and so a lot of things has changed. When the pandemic hit, it changed a lot of things from milk price coming down. And it really, you know, in agriculture, I think we learned that we needed to be flexible and creative. And we saw an opportunity to start what we call Fairmont Market. So we thought there was an opportunity to provide local meat and food to, you know, our local community. They could come in and buy either online or come into the market in a safe environment. So we now have our own pork, our own beef, and our own lamb. And then we sell all sorts of Cabot products. I skipped over, we ship 130,000 pounds of milk to Cabot every day. They turn that into about 12,000 pounds of cheese, depending on if your daily intake is an ounce of cheese or 2 ounces of cheese a day. We probably feed close to 100,000 people every day from our farms. So we sell Cabot products there. We sell local honey, local maple syrup, and we have coffee. Anyway, we sell lots of local products there. And that is one way of diversifying that we've done. We also plant Christmas trees. We raise our own beef and sell that elsewhere. You know, we've done a lot of things to diversify, but we couldn't do it without, I say we have 5 owners. The 5 owners we have 7 kids among us, and my cousins, husband and wife, and my wife are greatly involved in the business, running the market. We have some commercial cows that we sell, and then we have some registered cows that we sell, and they're very involved in all those things. So we're very focused on water quality and changing our cropping practices. Those have changed a lot in 20 years. We're currently planting winter rye on all our corn ground, so about 1,600 acres of corn ground. Some of the newest practices that we've started doing is a manure injection. So we're running 2 manure injectors. So we have, we don't worry about any runoff or soil erosion. We can do a single application of more manure and utilize all the nitrogen in that manure. So we use less commercial nitrogen.
Have you noticed a drop in commercial fertilizer since you've been using the injectors?
We have, yes, for multiple reasons though. For one, for the cost of nitrogen has just come up a lot. And, so we're putting all the manure in there and we're capturing all the nitrogen. In the past, when you used to broadcast, if you weren't working it in, you'd lose a lot of that nitrogen. So we're using a lot less nitrogen on our corn land. We actually didn't top dress any of our corn land last year with nitrogen, which is the first time we've ever done that.
Now, I don't know if the committee knows, how much do those injectors cost, those manure injectors?
So probably about $35,000 for a manure injector. And then we have a flow meter put on it. And then we've got what's called ag leader. So we're mapping every field. So you can pull up a map of a field and it'll tell you exactly how many gallons were applied to exactly every part of that field. And those go into our manure records. You can show, our setbacks from, a pond, a lake, a well, and exactly how much was applied. And we have, from our nutrient management plan, we have, an amount we're supposed to apply in the spring and an amount we're supposed to apply in the fall. And then you go look at exactly what we did, and it's mapped out, and it's 7,102 gallons on that. It's very exact. So the flow meter and the ag leader software is about another $15,000.
How many?
About $15,000 for that technology. And that's something, it's really hard to find good operators. And I mean, 20 years ago, we weren't keeping track of any manure records, and now we're keeping track of, handheld records, and there's just room for error. So when you go ahead to this, field mapping stuff, there's no room for error, really. It is what it is. And so we've made the investment to do that. And I mean, we're proud that, we've done that. I think a lot of these farms also have, but we know we're highly regulated, and we accept, that we're highly regulated. We accept the regulations, for the betterment of our farm, and Vermont itself. So when my first daughter, was born, I've always wondered if there's going to be an opportunity for her to return to the farm ever, or my cousin's kids. We're super involved in youth. My aunt and uncle run a 4-H group for years. So between the 4-H group, we're bringing kids in, and then our summer camps. Summer camps, we've got 125 kids that we bring in for 5 different weeks. We get, 25 kids each week, and they come in and they learn about agriculture. And we got kids coming out of Massachusetts. We got kids coming out of, Vermont, lots of local kids, lots of return kids that just love it. But we teach a lot of agriculture, and teach these new people that are moving into our towns what it is to be on a farm. They see our equipment, they see our cows, they see our manure, they get to take care of an animal. And I think that goes a long ways. The 4-H group is really super impressive, I think. So right now, if I think about it, we have 5 kids at Cornell University studying agriculture and dairy. 5 of them were in our 4-H group. They all grew up in East Montpelier. 1 of them is from a farm. 4 kids are not. And I think that's one of the reasons that this farm bill is really important, to get these young people a spot to be here, whether they're on farm or just working in agriculture, to support all the reasons we live here, all the reasons that people move here, for open lands, for, water quality, for great products coming out of this area. So if you ever visit my farm, you'll see everybody is wearing a Fairmont shirt, and the back, our motto is farming for future generations. And that really is our motto. And I think that's why, these bills are so important, that we have a spot for those young kids to come back to and continue to produce the milk that we do here in Vermont. All the changes I talked about in the last 20 years, I think going ahead, we've got a lot of different changes coming in my mind. Agrimark, we ship to Agrimark. They have a base program, so I can only make up to so much milk. And looking forward, I used to be able to just build a barn and grow cows, and that's how I grew my business. Now looking forward, I think it's going to be more diversification, and to bring in some of these young people, we're going to have to continue to grow our business, and we're going to have to do it differently. And I think that's something that's different. You ask how many people or how many farms have had lawsuits. Well, we've grown the same way for a long time. Looking forward in the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to grow differently. So we're going to grow differently, and we're going to grow with different people in our communities. So I don't know if the past, lawsuits is really a good thing, but things will happen differently. And I think that's one of the reasons that I'm here advocating to update this older bill. And last, thank you guys for giving me the opportunity. Farm, I milk 1,000 cows, 10 minutes away. You guys are all more than welcome to come as a committee and visit, to come individually, bring your families, bring your colleagues. I can forward along my information, and I tend to ramble when I'm passionate about stuff. And if you think this is rambling, wait till you come to the farm. I hope you have some time. I'd love to give you guys a tour.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tucker. Very interesting.
Yeah,
Brian?
thank you, Mr. Chair. So Tucker, I'd like to think that I don't spend a lot of time in a chair watching game shows all day, but I'm not sure I could follow you around all day. You seem like you're moving at the speed of light here, and even just having you sit here, I can tell that you just want to get this thing done and then get to the next thing. And so thank you very much for that. That was really, really impressive.
I'll slow down.
No, you don't need to do that either. Yeah, and to have that succession in mind already is really important too. And
Well, we're a little bit different. So my aunt and uncle are about 13 years older than I am. And I grew up in a single family home, and they pretty much took me under their wing as a young kid. And they brought me, showed me colleges, and they got me into agriculture. And I spent some time away in California, but I had the opportunity to come back, and that was always my dream, to be honest with you. But then my cousins are about 13 years younger than me. So we don't have this big generation gap, but then we've got 7 kids. We actually, my cousin is pregnant, so we've got eighth kid coming, but we have 7 kids coming from 9 to 2 currently. And they're all involved and super excited
that's
about it.
great.
Yeah, Brian?
Thanks. With my other hat on, I chair Senate Education in the afternoon. So I'm just wondering a couple things. First of all, I think our committee, without a doubt, is interested in getting young kids in schools involved in things like 4-H and how we incorporate that into, the school curriculum a little bit more. But in that, maybe we can have an email conversation about. The other thing that we've been talking a lot about is school meals and getting local farmers, to help supply the food to school meals.
Yep.
Are you in that supply chain at all with schools?
So,
or colleagues, or just trying to get a sense of that? If you supplied any of the schools?
So the short answer is no.
Okay.
So we've done some fundraising.
Yeah.
So we did a live nativity for 2 nights here in East Montpelier, and we had about 400 or 500 people attend.
Yeah.
And we've done that 2 years in a row. And we match every donation. That's a free event. We match every donation. And then we matched it actually with products out of our market. And then we brought that to the school, and the school distributed that to 10 families that they chose.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, this past year, I'm not sure why the donations weren't what we had expected. We don't want to hold this event and be asking people for money. But the year before we did it, and we had $1,500 worth of donations, and then we supplied $1,500. So we gave 10 families $300 worth of product out of our market. Half the donations and half what we matched. But as far as in the school lunch programs,
I was just curious, and we're just trying to find, are there bottlenecks? Do people need help getting into the schools, that kind of thing? For some farms, I also would get that some farms are going to be more interested in others. So yeah, just curious. Okay, great, thank you.
We supply a lot of the concessions for soccer with their burger and meat and stuff like that they're selling. But as far as in-school lunches, no, we're less than like half a mile from the school. We have tours every week during the good weather.
So the kids do come in.
They
from
walk
the
to
school,
school.
and they
they walk from the school to the farm, and we usually do a tour about 45 minutes, and then we have probably one of the most beautiful places in central Vermont. You just climb up on top of the hill, you can oversee the farm, you can look 365 degrees around. It's just amazing. They go up there, they eat lunch at our lunch spot, our picnic tables with volleyball and all that stuff. And then they come back down, and they do one more quick tour, and then they go back to the farm, back to the school.
Yeah. Thank you.
You have some relatives down south too, right?
So Richard, my uncle, so my mother's sister married Richard. So his sister farms down in Bradford.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They,
Margaret Walt Gladstone. Yes.
they do a good job with the public.
They
Yeah,
do a great job with the public. They do a great job on the dairy, and they've diversified a long time ago into pumpkins. You know, and that's another thing. It's different farming than what we're used to, and it presents its own challenges, I think, as well.
yeah. Operating in 13 different towns, you must run into quite a few neighbors.
Yeah, so we've got 3,800 acres, and I think we own about a third of that land. So we rent the rest of the land. So we rent a lot of land. We run into a lot of different neighbors. We will run into a lot of new neighbors, a lot of diverse neighbors. You know, if you go up into Craftsbury, you've got a very diverse group of people living up there, or vacationing up there.
Is that where you live?
So I currently live here in East Montpelier. So,
Who's your family in Craftsbury?
so we actually don't, I lived up there for 9 years,
Yeah.
and we bought Randy and Louise Calderwood's farm.
Sure.
So right there on South Albany Road.
Yeah, my family's on Erie Road.
Oh, sure, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, so we
Some of them,
use,
yeah.
like Bruce Urie's land.
Yeah.
Alan Young's land.
Yeah.
All the creek roads, so we use a lot of land. We have about 800 acres we use up there. But it's a very diverse group. It's, you know, it's some.
It's changed a lot.
Yeah, it has changed a lot, and that was a super inviting town to move to, when I moved there in 2005, and I miss Craftsbury, actually. It's a great community.
Yeah, I lived up there for a while, so yeah.
It's a great community.
It's a great spot, yeah.
But
So other questions for Tucker?
well, thank you guys very much.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
I look forward to working with you, and that definitely take me up if you ever want.
Yeah, it'd be great to
farm.
That's a
Yeah.
great
All
offer.
right.
Where's your, you have a farm store or?
Yep, so right at my house where I live is Lyle Haven Road. It used to be Lyle Haven Farm, and Jerry Rappaport from Boston owned that. It was kind of an investment farm, and we had been using all the land and cropping all the land. And when he decided to sell it, it was in 2014. And it was a very good year in the dairy industry, and we decided to buy that farm, and we thought we would make a go of milking 60 registered cows there and sell some registered genetics. Since 2014, the dairy industry has been tough, and we realized milking 60 registered cows there was not going to work. So we now raise some heifers and dry cows and pigs and some sheep. And we actually have turned the whole front office and milk house into a farm store with a full kitchen.
Yeah.
And we do lots of community events on a Friday night. We might, cook something up and have people come in and try it. We do a recipe bag every month, so people can buy 4 recipes, and we pack a bag with $65 worth of stuff. And, with those recipes, they can, make different meals for themselves. But it's right there at Lyle Haven Road.
Yeah.
And we're not always open. We've got a big online following. If you go to FairmontFarming.com, you get right to the market pretty quick, and then you'll see a lot of what we do. Our website is a lot about us, a lot about our farming practices, our animals, our locations, and then our market. And I think it's FairmontFarming.com.
Yeah, well, if there are no other questions, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tucker.
Yes, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Get some energy. This,
Yeah, I know. Pumped us up.
he'll give him 40 years, he'll slow down.
I think you're still energetic. too.
Well.
Don't cut yourself short.
Okay, well, Steve, did you or Laura come to testify on this?
Yes, Senator Starr, if you'd like us to.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just gonna run to the bathroom. Excuse me.
Yeah. We'll take a break in 15 minutes. We can get through the agency, and you still haven't had Michael yet to go through the draft. Good morning.
Good morning, Senator Starr, and thank you. Good morning to everyone. Steve Collier from the Agency of Agriculture. I'm the general counsel there.
So every time I talk with farmers, I realize how much better they are at everything, including public speaking. So they've already all said what I came to say in a much more effective way. But I'd like to just focus on the law for a second, if I might, because I plan to talk more about what's problematic about the current law than instead about how we should move forward, because I think that's the impetus for the change. Is the purpose, in our judgment, the purpose of the current right to farm statute is all exactly as it should be. It's designed to protect farms. It's designed to allow farms to diversify and change their practices. The way the statute is worded, the implementation of it is not in any way aligned with the purpose. It's porous, it's riddled with holes. When you look at the protection, it's a plaintiff's attorney's dream, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is when I look at litigation, and I want to start by saying, whenever you're involved in litigation, you're losing. Whether you win at the end or you lose at the end, the cost of litigation itself is really extensive. And that's why I think the statute is so flawed, because if you look at what the statute requires, there's 4 different factual questions that are in the current statute. One is, are you conforming with all the laws? Okay, that creates factual questions. The other is, are you using good agricultural practices? Again, factual questions. The other is, were you there first? Again, factual questions. The other is, have you changed anything significantly? Again, factual questions. The reason that matters is when you get into a court, the court can't decide factual questions until a trial, which is either by a judge or a jury. Factual questions don't get decided by the court, legal questions do. So in the statute, when you include all those factual questions, that's just a recipe for litigation instead of clarity. So if you want to actually have protection, I think it's really important to describe what is protected. Right now, this series of factual questions means that you get sued, you go through months or years of discovery, which is when everybody exchanges information. You're likely going to have to pay hire an expert to be able to assess these factual questions. When you think that a lawyer probably costs you between $200 and $300 an hour, some maybe a little bit less, some a little bit more. But just to pay for an attorney for a week's worth of time is a week, 40-hour week, 8,000 to 12,000 hours just for that 1 week of time. 1 week of time is nowhere near enough to go through discovery, defending the claim, filing motions, going to trial. It's just a really big cost. And what I think is problematic about that is most neighbors, I don't think, want to sue one another. So that works pretty well. In fact, the Senator Campion's question about how many lawsuits have there been, I don't think that's the right question, because I think the question is, what is the protection and does it work? And the reason I say
Well,
that,
I'm always looking for what's the problem that we're trying to solve. This might be the way for me to rephrase that.
and that's what
Yeah,
I'm trying to
yeah.
explain now, is what is the problem, is that I don't think the protection that the statute was designed to include was ever effectuated. And I think part of that is when you think about this law being adopted or enacted in 1981, farms weren't regulated then, their land use practices. So maybe at that time, the only remedy for a neighbor who didn't like something the farm was doing was through a nuisance action. Since that time, there's been as you are all very familiar with, has been a whole litany of additional regulations, many targeting water quality, but others targeting other things. So there's this whole rubric of requirements now. So I think our perspective is that rather than farm practices being decided in individual civil actions between neighbors and farmers, the state, meaning you all, should be determining what is an appropriate farm practice. Because farmers are in the unique position of living where they work, most of them. So they are, they're at their home and they're doing practices that do have impacts. Manure stinks, it just does. Some people don't mind the smell, some people do. It varies at different times, but if the state thinks that manure smell is a legitimate nuisance claim, even if the farmer is doing everything right to manage it, that's a huge risk to the farm. If the farm does everything proper with its manure according to state requirements, but it's still subject to civil suit, that just the cost of defending that suit could put a vulnerable farm out of business. So the way that I think about this is instead of individual neighbors deciding what's a good farm practice, the state should be deciding what's a good farm practices or good practice. And if the farmer is meeting those expectations and is reasonably and responsibly running the farm, they ought to be protected from a distinct civil action, which literally can drive them out of business. And where this really can get exploited is if you have a wealthy neighbor and a farmer. Because wealthy neighbors, the cost of litigation can be irrelevant. And just through the threat of litigation, and then specifically through the cost of litigation, a wealthy neighbor who may be new to the area or not, but just may not like the practice, can literally drive a farm out of business. And since the goal of this protection is to keep Vermont productive in agriculture, the idea that somebody who's well-heeled can take advantage of someone who isn't by bringing an action against someone who's doing everything within the scope of the law is a little unsettling. So to back to your question, Senator Campion, I think what we should be trying to do is determine on a state level what's appropriate. And then if farms are meeting those standards, they ought to be insulated from legal liability.
So that may be part of the reason that several have talked about if a farm is complying in good standing with the RAPs, which are a lot of practices that we've required, that should be an aspect that needs to be in the bill.
Yeah, and that to me is a really interesting question, because right now, the way that the statute is worded currently, there's these 4 thresholds that a farm has to meet. It's generally speaking, when a plaintiff sues somebody, they have the burden of proof, meaning they have to prove that somebody violated the law. But the way the statute is set up right now, it's kind of, in my view, and I'm not sure that it's been interpreted exactly this way, but it's almost set up more as an affirmative defense, which means that the burden is on the defendant to prove it. So the way it's worded is the farm has to prove that they're complying with all laws. Well, that's kind of crazy because
that's the way most laws are written. Anytime I've gone to court, I had to prove I was innocent more than the plaintiff had to prove I was guilty. I mean,
well,
I don't know if that ever happened to anybody else.
Let's go around the table.
But I think the scope is really broad to say you have to conform with all laws. I personally believe that the law that should matter is the one that's related to the nuisance. And what I mean by that is, let's say, farms have to have buffers that meet certain requirements on the edge of their field, depending on where the field is located. If somebody doesn't have the appropriate size buffer, that's a violation of the RAPs that absolutely should be addressed. But if a neighbor doesn't like the smell of manure, and that's what they're complaining about in a nuisance, that buffer doesn't have anything to do with the manure at all. So in my opinion, the burden should be on the plaintiff to prove that there is a legal violation, meaning the farm's not meeting state requirements, and that is causally related to the nuisance itself, because it's just too broad otherwise. Again, it's a discovery. I mean, if a farm literally has to prove they're doing everything right, that's impossible. I mean, you can't, it's not something you can actually do. To prove, it's almost like proving a negative. So what should matter is, what is the source of the alleged nuisance? What is the farm doing that's causing that alleged nuisance? And are the activities related to that activity following state law? So I recommend sort of tightening the scope, putting the burden on the plaintiff to prove that the farm is doing something that doesn't meet the requirements. And because of that, there's this nuisance activity. Nobody's suggesting that neighbors shouldn't be protected from bad practices. Neighbors have a right to the use and enjoyment of their property. They have a right to live where they do. They should be able to do so without unreasonable interference by a farm. But if the state decides these farm practices are appropriate, and since we do want farming and we do want farms to be able to diversify and change, it seems like that should be the threshold, not an individual neighbor's tolerances for those activities.
Yeah, so if all of a sudden, you've got 2 neighbors, they've been living side by side for 10 years, great relationship. Neighbors growing, I don't know, strawberries, big piece of property. And all of a sudden they sell. They sell to somebody out in California. Landlord lives out in California. They're running the farm kind of from California. And then they decide, we're gonna switch this farm around. We're gonna put a couple manure pits here. We're gonna put something right over here. And it's really not what folks, as you can imagine, may have signed up for. What happens? That person's like, hey, geez, you should have thought twice before buying this 10 years ago.
Well, I
I'm just
think
wondering under how this is drafted.
under the current law,
No, under how this is drafted.
I haven't I quickly
haven't seen
looked
the
at the
draft?
draft, but I
Okay.
haven't really studied
Okay.
that. But to me, whatever draft is there right
Yeah.
now, the bigger question is what should the policy be? And I guess what I'm suggesting.
But I'm wondering from the neighbor's perspective, they've lived there 10, 20 years. Now they were looking at strawberry fields. Now they're looking at manure pits right on there. Do they have any, in your opinion, should they have any recourse at all? I mean, it's just a yes or no question.
No, it's not, because it depends on how you construct the protection. And I think there are a variety of ways to do it. I think the issue you're bringing up is coming to a nuisance, which Carolyn Gordon also raised. The question is whether or not people who pre-existed are the only ones who should be protected, or whether agriculture more broadly should be protected. And I think that's an important policy question. I think there's a reasonable position to take to say, if you are changing your practice, but you're doing it appropriately, meaning you're managing your manure appropriately, you're following all the laws and requirements, then there's no reason that because you've changed, I mean, another neighbor somewhere down the road who has to deal with it when it pre-existed, why can't this neighbor? That's a policy question. Right now, it's set up to only protect those who pre-existed. Whether
So you're
that's,
not testifying on this current bill. You haven't read the bill.
I skimmed it quickly
Okay.
last night,
Okay.
but it was more,
Okay.
I was trying to highlight the flaws that I think exist now. And I think there are important policy questions about, and a lot of options about how to design that protection moving forward.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Other questions for Steve?
I'll just say one thing. I appreciate this, Steve, and I think the committee, when we took a look at the presumption of rebuttable presumption and all, we really realized, I think, that that's something that we need to look at first. How we do this with our council remains to be seen. This, I'm sure, will change over the next few weeks.
Yeah.
But to your point, the current law just doesn't do it, I don't believe. I'll just add to Joe Tisbert, who was there. I was in the courtroom for more than one day with that case back in Rutland with the bull that got out loose and there was a fatality involved. And I could see the absolute distress on the face of the farmer who was involved. So I can sympathize with that. I come from a long line of broadcasting. That's what I did for 45, 50 years in Rutland. So the publicity associated with that case, because that's how we sell newspapers and that's how we keep listeners to radio stations, made it pretty well obvious how the media felt about it, that it was the farmer's fault and the bull got out and somebody got killed over it. So it wasn't a fair situation if you were the farmer, for sure, because there was no negligence in my view. Well, I guess you could argue that, but anyway, it was one more example of putting farmers in a bad light, and that's the way I saw it. And to the chair's point earlier, if in fact, let's say the price of 100 weight's $19, and we're not talking about a level playing field, if Vermont is really, and if I did the math right, $17.24, when all the surrounding states are at 19, we're really behind the eight ball by $1.76 to begin with. I think we need to do something here in this committee, and I think most of the committee members agree. What that may wind up with, I don't know yet, but I think we're definitely going to take a look at this.
Work in that direction.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Bill?
I'd like to say one other thing in good testimony, anyway, but I'd like to say one other thing. The attorney, Rook Dwyer, he said, I think the bill drafted is certainly an improvement over current Vermont law, head and shoulders better. So that's.
So we got something to
That
start.
gives us an idea that we're headed in a positive direction.
Yeah.
But, you know, like Mr. Collier was saying, the farmer, and Amanda also said, the farmer is presuming that if they're following the law and they're in compliance, that it indemnifies the farmer. But I'm hoping that's the case, but is it not necessarily so?
Oh,
That's the question.
you can't protect everybody from everything. You know,
Some states do have attorney cost provisions built in, so that the farmer is awarded attorney costs if the litigation is brought and then the suit is
in a
dismissed.
frivolous way. Yeah.
Amanda's got a question.
Amanda?
Thank you. I just wanted to weigh in on the example that was proposed earlier about the neighbor and the farmer changing from strawberries to dairy. And I would just say that in most towns, and certainly with the regional planning, our land is designated for certain practices. And certainly when it's land trusted land. So if the strawberry farmer wasn't able to afford a living growing strawberries and he wanted to look to a different type of agriculture, and it fell in the realm of the regulatory of the town and the county and went through those adequate measures, then I would afford the argument that they should be protected. And I would say the same thing is happening in the housing development. How many houses were one-family homes that are now being developed into apartments or condos or townhomes? There's a field, a neighbor, was next to a beautiful field that all of a sudden got developed. Not all of a sudden, there's Act 250 and different things, but yet this is where they located to. And now it's changed to a townhomes. I think that that's society, and that society drives the changes in our environment. And for us to have the makeup we have, ag land designated either by, town zoning or regulatory, county planning or investment in land trust really needs to be protected to be used as ag. And if you can't make a living growing strawberries, I'm just using the example, and you need to switch the type of agriculture that you do, I think that affords the Vermont, it offers some protection, and it keeps our lands open as a working landscape.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. We've got a Rosie, people are coming at quarter of 11. So, Laura, did you have something you wanted?
Just a couple things. I know you're trying to get moving. Just a couple things real quick. Just want to make sure you're aware of. In the RAPs, the way that we operate, we don't have nuisance protections within them per se. So like in the large farm rules, we have direct authority to regulate nuisance. So odor, flies, noise, traffic, and other pests. But in the RAPs, we do not specifically have like this, you will regulate these nuisance, but we regulate farming activities, right? And just to share with you some of the complaints and types of things that I've been getting over at least the last year, I've been getting them for years, but generally what I hear is, well, one, people who are frustrated and call us because they're seeing something. Like an example would be manure trucks going back and forth, and there's a billion of them, and how could this be? And they must be taking it somewhere, and it must be a flood of manure wherever it's going. When in reality, we investigate, we do the work, and they're moving it from one manure pit to another manure pit, so that they can maybe do digestion in one place and do the energy and all the climate goals that everybody has, but then also make sure they meet the nutrient management goals. So that doesn't satisfy some of those people. They don't understand that it doesn't work for them, and but we say that that's how that is, right? The other area is cannons and sounds. That's one area that people get very frustrated about. A lot of times it's blueberry crops where people are shooting off cannons to get birds away so they don't eat their crops. That one comes up about every 3 years, I would say. And it really bothers people because it's a very intense regimen of cannons going off very loudly. But I have personally found it very interesting that in all these cases that I've had people complain, the actual farmer lives there too. So they're both dealing with what's going on. So the last one I'll say that we've had a few this year is livestock moving off the property. And, you know, what is our role in terms of keeping those livestock on the property? And we don't have a role in that space, right? We can cost share for fencing potentially if there's a water quality issue, but otherwise it's the farmer's responsibility to maintain those animals and keep them on their property. And then it becomes potentially the health officer of the town or
the town's control.
Or the police jurisdiction. So a lot of people think we have that role and responsibility to be able to deal with that, but we don't. So I just wanted to explain some of the things that the REPs don't cover necessarily, but we're somehow tangentially involved. Manure on the road is another one that comes up quite a bit, especially around at stop signs, because the stop and go may have a release, and then
If we could control the climate, then the mud on the road might slow down.
anyways, so yeah, our jurisdiction over these nuisance things are specific in LFO authority, but no other authority within the agency.
Good to know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and Michael, we still haven't gotten to you to go through the draft.
Yeah, we need to go through the draft.
I don't know what your schedule is for the rest of the week, but
Friday morning I'm scheduled, but Thursday, tomorrow I am not. But I think we have.
We have a full house. The Friday morning.
Friday morning I'm in house ag.
yeah. Is that most of the morning, Michael?
It's as soon as they get off the floor and come in.
And what, no. Well, we operate, starting at 9.
Sure, I could be here at 9.
And we've got that open, right, Leah?
Yes.
So we could run through that with Michael and get what he has down. And that, of course, will be on Zoom if any of you want to listen in and take part. You're more than welcome. Linda can send a Zoom link out to everybody.
Well, it'd be nice to listen at least,
Well, yeah, you can listen, but you can't say, hey, you guys are going the wrong direction here. We have but so, if you want to get on, hey, feel free, because we're here to serve you people, not just to listen to ourselves. So
we appreciate the effort. Thank you.
yeah, and Tucker, if you have time, you or your crew, any of them, feel free to you just email Linda.
Okay.
She can give you a link to.
Just before we break, what I hear a lot of now is with more and more tractors traveling further and equipment traveling further and further. I hear a lot of people complaining about agricultural equipment on the roads.
Oh, yeah.
And you see big backups of traffic and as they're moving equipment back and forth. I know you guys move stuff from East Montpelier to Craftsbury. And as farmers get bigger, they travel further and further afield to get further afield, to get to their fields and get to their crops, and whether it's shit or whether it's I can sit on Route 15 and I can see traffic backed up at times half a mile or a mile.
And everybody's in a hurry.
And everybody's in a hurry,
Yeah.
and they can't wait to pass. And there's, I know last year there was one incident in town, an accident passing tractors. And I hear about that all the time now.
Well, just a reminder, in the last decade, for sure, maybe a little bit longer than that, we have pushed farmers to make more liquid, right? So water quality regulations mean total collection, and that means you have to move it farther. So, you know, the policies that we also set up are also driving some of that distance that farmers have to.
I'm just raising the issue, and it isn't just manure. It is,
Feed the whole nine.
the feed when, you know, when they're planting in the spring or in the fall, if you're, cutting corn and it's all of the above.
No, that's where some of that $1.78
Yeah, I
comes
totally,
from.
Right.
but I, you
Keep
know,
piling on the regs and ways that we want people to operate. It costs more money, so it costs our farmers more, so they have to go from a 3,200 gallon spreader
72.
to a 7,000 gallon spreader. So that's bigger, wider, longer, heavier. But anyways, hopefully we'll get something here drafted up and rolling shortly. So we're going to take a little bit of break. Rosie will be